refugees, of 2,000 Hazara refugees are actually registered prior to July 2014, who are in more desperate situations and challenges that we are facing today. So it's more than 10 years that we're living in a situation where we have no access to education, no access to library, no access to any of our basic human rights, and sometimes we don't even have access to marriage or to make families. And there are so many children that have also no access to education. I actually call this a genocide on its own terms. In Indonesia, we are actually facing a severe deterioration of mental health status within the Hazara community in particular. We've already seen 14 suicide attempts by the community. And since the crisis last year in August, we see again more families getting more deteriorated in mental trauma as well. So we've been trying to raise our voice. We've been trying to do many different advocacy through protests, but we feel like no one is listening to our voices. We also think that UNHCR is neither listening to us as well. They're basically telling us that we haven't sent an invitation to you to be here, and if you're here, you're on your own will. Okay, so my question to the Australian government as well as to UNHCR is that what's the difference between those refugees that are in Papua New Guinea and Nauru to those refugees in Indonesia? Is there any difference in these refugees situations? So we understand that, those refugees who stayed in Papua New Guinea and Nauru for 4 years, we saw the international community as well as the Australian community standing up with those refugees. And just in 4 years, we start seeing resettlement happening from US. But from Indonesia, we've had a huge severe silence, especially towards the 2014 policy. Thank you. So his emphasis is that we really need Australian government as well as the other international states to start resettling refugees from Indonesia, considering that many of us who have been living here for more than 10 years, we also understand that there has been more than 90 billions of money being filtered into Indonesia. And the question is, why wouldn't we invest that money into resettlement and ensuring that we get a permanent home eventually? So his point is that, we want to be heard and we don't feel like we're being heard enough.
Intriguing. So we're going to invite you to respond.
Sorry, I'm just conscious of the clock. I wonder if we can just collect the remaining comments and just take them all at once?
The remaining comments really relate to Australia regional.
No, thank you, colleagues, again. Let me just start with maybe the three kind of cohorts. On Malaysia situation and the refugees, as you rightly said. The situation before the coup was one dynamic, and as you rightly say, the issues around the refugees and the prospects for possible return or not was one. That situation has obviously changed right now, and the review of cases which are stopped at that time has restarted, as you know. So the issue has completely changed from February last year. Okay, as you know. And the situation is extremely challenging. We will try to look at that whole, for Myanmar asylum seekers as Myanmar asylum seekers, right? All the whole group. Yeah. On the CDM, I think you're absolutely right. It's extremely challenging. The issue of access to Mizoram and Manipur has been one of our main advocacy points to the government of India. Yeah, we have not been given access, as you know. I was there myself, accompanying the Assistant High Commissioner of Protection in New Delhi, and this is one of the key points we made to the government, saying, give us access. But the government does not give us access. As you know, for UNHCR, we are a body which works with member states. If a government says you don't have access to an area, we can't go into that area by force, right? So it's a real challenge. The advocacy point remains. So as you know very well, I met with many of the community-based organizations which we are supporting with humanitarian assistance in a very robust manner for the people who are coming from Chin State into Manipur and Mizoram. We are also obviously supporting the local state authorities who are a bit more amenable to these refugees being there. But is it a perfect solution? No, we're trying very much to really advocate, but I don't think in the short term we will get access. But we will not give up on our advocacy, but we're supporting, working with very much the community-based organizations in Manipur and Mizoram, including providing humanitarian assistance, which has steadily increased. I'm sure you have the data. If you don't, we'd be happy to provide this data to you. Yes, and then on the Thailand side as well. Similarly, in Thailand as well, our principal point has been first, let individuals have access to territory and documentation. Again, as you know very clearly, the Thai government's approach is we will not give documentation. We'll try to manage them temporarily. Many of them are sent back after with food and assistance right across. But then you have CDM profiles which are in Thailand and they're there without regularization. It's a very sensitive issue for Thailand, as you can imagine. But the assistance we are trying to provide with organizations on the ground, we do provide to the individuals we know, but formal registration has still been rejected by the government of Thailand for this population, right? And we will try to encourage them to do that, including with many member states and donors who are trying to persuade them that this would be the best way forward. But let's see what happens. It's a very, very challenging political space to negotiate. But we are putting the principle forward, which is registration and documentation is the best way to manage the population and support a population. But it's a political decision, unfortunately, right? Engagement in different ethnic groups, very much the case. Point well taken. When I was in India, for example, we met with different groups. We met with the Rohingya refugees, the Jin refugees, so different groups and communities. We try to do that. If there are areas in which you feel that's not happening, please let us know. That's exactly, I mean, they are all Myanmar nationals, but sometimes the dynamics, the interests, challenges are different to different communities. I myself met with different groups when I was there. We continue to do that. Similarly, with other refugees from other groups as well. Access to services in Malaysia, it's a huge challenge. I wouldn't say there are no opportunities. We have tried to work with some very good NGOs which are running programs for education and health, including with the Qatari government. We brought resources through Sheikh Amoza, Education Can't Wait, and others to work with the Malaysian government to give it. Is it adequate? Absolutely not. But I wouldn't say it's a zero-sum game. I mean, I think we have to work with every opportunity there is to expand it. There are fantastic partners, also supported by many of you, who are trying to do this work. But the access to livelihood is a real challenge. It's a real challenge. And the registration is a huge challenge. And as you know, more than one time, the Ministry of Interior has said they want to throw UNHCR out of Malaysia. And that's because it's been a big point of advocacy from Amnesty, from Human Rights Watch, from the High Commissioner for Human Rights. And that is one of the first points the High Commissioner raises when he goes to some of these countries about access to detention to look at individuals who are for long term. And sadly, in some countries, they are being deported back. If an individual is in detention for long enough and you put a piece of paper and say, okay, will you sign that you're going back voluntarily? Of course, you sign it because you don't want to be in detention any longer. And we know the countries that also say people went back voluntarily. Yes, but they were in detention for 6 months. And of course, you want to get out of detention, so you return to some countries. The deportation of Rohingyas into India, from India into Bangladesh, has caused a lot of issues also in Bangladesh. We're saying we are being seen now as the dumping ground for any refugee. And this is a real challenge for the Bangladeshi government, who have 1 million Rohingya on its territory. Again, another issue we raised with the Indian government when we were there. Our strongest point as a protection agency, as you know, like many of you, is advocacy. With certain nationalities and with other nationalities, for example, the security clearance process is much more lengthy than for other nationalities. Sadly so, but that is what it is. We are trying very much to expand the resettlement for Myanmar nationals and Rohingya refugees from Bangladesh and in Indonesia, Malaysia as well, including for the Afghans. Is the pace fast enough? No. Are the numbers big enough? No. But it's going to increase, and it is increasing, as we've seen from fiscal year 2022 and certainly in 2023. And we continue to advocate for that space to be expanded. And your advocacy, of course, in that is incredibly important. Thank you.